October 14, 1943, 5 miles above the Earth, deep inside the hostile airspace of the German Reich. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano is crouching inside a vibrating aluminum coffin. The tail section of his B-17 Flying Fortress, call sign Knockout Dropper, is so cramped he cannot stand. He is perched on a narrow metal seat, little more than a bicycle saddle, his knees braced against the freezing fuselage. Through the small, warped plexiglass window, he watches a speck grow into a shark, a Focke-Wulf 190. The German fighter banks lazily, then positions itself for an attack run. 6 o'clock low, the bomber's single most vulnerable, most feared angle, the coffin corner. Romano squints, his breath fogging the inside of his oxygen mask. His hands, clumsy and thick fur-lined gloves, wrestle the twin 50-caliber machine guns into position. He lines up his ring and bead sight. This is the aiming system the Army Air Force has provided. It is in reality 2 metal posts, a primitive tool from the 19th century, expected to work in a 3-dimensional 500-mile-per-hour battle. It offers no compensation for speed, no calculation for deflection, no help whatsoever. He fires. A stream of tracers arcs harmlessly, pathetically, behind the diving fighter. The FW-190's cannons flash, bright, terrifying lights. 20mm shells tear through the B-17's thin aluminum skin like tissue paper. Romano hears them, a brutal thump-thump crunch walking up the fuselage. The entire 30-ton aircraft shudders violently. This exact scene is repeating itself 291 times today. This is the second Schweinfurt raid, a mission so desperate, so infamous, that its crews will forever call it Black Thursday. The mission was born from a dangerous idea, a belief, an arrogant myth. It was the core doctrine of the American bomber mafia, a group of generals who believed their new B-17 Flying Fortress was exactly that, a fortress. Bristling with 1350-caliber machine guns, they theorized it could fly deep into enemy territory, in broad daylight without fighter escort, and defend itself through sheer, overwhelming firepower. They believed the bomber would always get through. On the morning of October 14th, the 8th Air Force dispatches 291 of these fortresses to strike the Schweinfurt ball-bearing plants. This isn't just a factory. It is the industrial heart of the Nazi war machine. Destroy it, and the German army grinds to a halt. There is just one fatal problem. To reach Schweinfurt, the bombers must fly far beyond the range of their only protection. The P-47 Thunderbolts, their little friends, can only take them as far as the German border. At 1:30 p.m., over the city of Aachen, the fighter escorts waggle their wings and peel away. Their fuel is low. They must return to England for the next 3 hours. The 291 bombers are utterly, completely alone. And the Luftwaffe is waiting. The Germans have gathered more than 700 fighters, Messerschmitt 109s, Focke-Wulf 190s, even twin-engine Messerschmitt 110 destroyers, armed with rockets. It is the single largest defensive patrol ever assembled. They don't just attack the bomber stream. They swarm it. The air explodes. Giant B-17s, each carrying 10 men, blossom into fireballs. Wings shear off. Fuselages spiral down, trailing black smoke for 5 miles to the earth. Men bail out into the flak-filled sky, their parachutes ripped to shreds or engulfed in the flames of their neighboring aircraft. The radio channels are a screaming chaos of "Mayday, Mayday, we're hit!" and "Fighters on the tail!" And then, silence. By nightfall, the survivors limp back to England. The mathematics are not just brutal, they are unsustainable. 60 bombers, more than 20% of the entire attacking force, are shot down. Another 138 aircraft, return to base so badly damaged, so riddled with holes and cannon shells, they will never fly again. 600 American airmen are dead or missing in a single afternoon. At this rate, no bomber crew will statistically survive their required 25-mission tour. The 8th Air Force has been, in effect, broken. Post-mission analysis at 8th Air Force Headquarters in High Wycombe reveals the grim truth. Tail gunners, supposedly the bomber's last line of defense against the Luftwaffe's preferred attack angle, are achieving hit rates below 8%. Fighter pilots need merely attack from the rear, endure a few seconds of wildly inaccurate return fire, and methodically destroy America's billion-dollar strategic bombing campaign. One fortress at a time, senior commanders gather in despair. The defensive armament supposed to make the B-17 a flying fortress has failed, catastrophically. Without a solution, daylight precision bombing, the entire strategic doctrine of the American war effort, faces cancellation. What these generals don't know is that at that very moment, on a cold, wind-swept hardstand at Bassingbourn Airfield, a 22-year-old tail gunner with barely a high school education is sketching a design in his logbook. WWII, design that violates multiple Army Air Force regulations, a design that will be called mechanically impossible by trained weapons. Engineers, a design that will triple tail gun accuracy and save thousands of American lives. This is the story of the innovation they tried to ban, and the gunner who refused to stop. To understand why Romano's innovation proved so revolutionary, you must first understand the impossible problem tail gunners faced in 1943. The B-17 Flying Fortress entered combat with a defensive philosophy borrowed from naval warfare. The idea was simple: bristle the aircraft with enough machine guns to create overlapping fields of fire, just like a battleship. Army Air Force promotional materials boasted it was a flying battleship. Reality proved brutally different. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano reports to Bassingbourn Airfield, England, in August 1943. He's a replacement tail gunner for the legendary 91st Bomb Group. He isn't an engineer. He isn't a scientist. He's a former factory worker from Pittsburgh. No college degree. Barely 19 years old when he enlisted. The Army trained him for 6 weeks on how to clear jams, estimate range, and pray his shots connected. His assigned position, the tail gunner station, is universally described by the men who occupied it as a coffin. It's the most isolated, most terrifying position on the aircraft. He must kneel for 8 hours at a time, feet braced against the aircraft's structure, hands wrestling two 84-pound Browning M2 machine guns. The guns pivot on a simple yoke mount. But his aiming system, that was the real problem. The ring and bead sight was a relic, a metal circle with a post at the front. To hit a diving fighter, Romano must, in a split second, estimate the target's speed relative to his own aircraft. He must calculate the deflection angle, where to aim ahead of the target. He must compensate for bullet drop over hundreds of yards. He must execute all these complex trigonometric calculations while wearing bulky gloves, breathing thin oxygen in -40-degree temperatures, all while another human being is actively trying to kill him. It was, quite simply, impossible. Expert gunners, firing from stationary aircraft at towed targets in the calm skies of Texas, achieved hit rates that barely exceeded 12%. In combat, stressed, oxygen-deprived, and under fire, actual hit rates plummeted to between 6 and 8%. The Luftwaffe recognized this vulnerability immediately. German fighter tactics evolved throughout 1943 to exploit it. They perfected the Sechser Angriff, the 6 o'clock level or low attack. German pilots were instructed to accept 15 to 20 seconds of inaccurate tailgun fire, close to 200 yards, and then unleash devastating 20mm cannon strikes. Luftwaffe after-action reports began to described the B-17 tail position as marginally dangerous, its accuracy insufficient to deter attacks. The proof was in the casualty. Lists August 17, 1943. The first Schweinfurt raid. 60 bombers lost. October 8, 1943. The Bremen raid. 30 bombers lost. October 10, 1943. The Münster raid. 30 bombers lost, and now Black Thursday. 60 more. The 8th Air Force is hemorrhaging bombers, and, more importantly, trained crews. Faster than factories in America can replace them. General Henry Hap Arnold, the commanding general of the entire Army Air Forces, receives the casualty reports in Washington. He is horrified. He questions whether daylight bombing can, or should, continue. Engineers at Wright Field propose solutions. More guns, bigger caliber guns, powered turrets. Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center begins designing an improved tail turret. But the development timeline stretches deep into 1944. Prototypes for powered turrets exist, but installing them requires removing the entire tail section of the bomber. It's a months-long factory modification, impossible to implement on the hundreds of bombers already fighting and dying in England. Meanwhile, men die. Michael Romano flies his first combat mission on August 19, 1943, to Gilserijen Airfield in the Netherlands. He fires 480 rounds at 3, attacking Focke-Wulf 190s. He thinks, he prays, he scored hits. But when the gun camera footage is reviewed later, the truth is laid bare. Every single tracer passed harmlessly behind the targets. The fighters he was shooting at destroyed 2 bombers in his formation. After his third mission, Romano stays on the hard stand long after the rest of his crew has gone to debriefing. He just stares at his guns. His hands shake, not from fear, but from the sheer physical exhaustion of manhandling 84-pound weapons through sustained fire while kneeling at 25,000 feet. That night, in his Nissen hut, he sketches his first design concept. The problem isn't the gun, he realizes. The Browning M2 is one of the finest weapons ever made. It's not even the mount. It's the tail gunners are firing blind. They are chasing targets they cannot properly track, aiming at points in space they cannot accurately predict. What Romano needs is something the Army Air Forces hasn't provided. A way to see where his bullets will actually go. Before he pulls the trigger, he needs a reflector sight, the kind fighter pilots use, a device that projects an illuminated aiming reticle onto a piece of glass, allowing for point-and-shoot accuracy. But the tail position's cramped quarters, the tiny window, the violent vibration, it all makes a standard reflector installation impossible. Unless someone is willing to break the rules. Staff Sergeant Michael Romano possesses exactly 0 qualifications for weapons engineering. He was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in 1924. He dropped out of high school at 16 to work in the steel mills when his father fell ill. He operated blast furnaces. He repaired machinery. He learned practical metallurgy through trial and error. Not from textbooks. When America enters the war, he enlists, hoping to escape the grueling factory work. The military assigns him to aerial gunnery school, not because of any demonstrated aptitude, but because he's small. At 5'7" and 145 pounds, Romano can squeeze into the tiny spaces that eliminate larger recruits. He completes basic gunnery training at Harlingen, Texas, scoring merely average on range qualifications. His instructors note his adequate trigger discipline and satisfactory weapons maintenance. Nobody identifies him as exceptional. He receives his silver gunner's wings and is shipped to England, an interchangeable part in the vast, grinding machinery of the 8th Air Force. But Romano possesses one trait his training record doesn't capture. He cannot accept systems that don't work, especially when those systems are getting his friends killed. After his 5th combat mission on October 4, 1943, to Frankfurt, Romano's frustration reaches a critical mass. His bomber, knockout dropper, returns to base with 78 flak holes and severe damage from 2 separate fighter attacks. Romano fired 620 rounds. He hit nothing. His best friend, the tail gunner on a neighboring B-17, died when a Messerschmitt Bf-109 attacked from dead astern, and Romano's counterfire failed to deter it. That night, Romano walks to the aircraft revetment. He carries a maintenance flashlight and his logbook. He climbs into the tail section of his bomber, the cramped space still reeking of cordite and hydraulic fluid, and he just stares. He stares at the ring and bead sight that failed him, that failed his friend. The moment of insight arrives, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a simple, practical observation. Romano notices his own reflection in the curved plexiglass window. In that distorted mirror, he can see behind his aircraft's tail. He can see angles the primitive ring and bead sight can never cover. He begins to sketch rapidly, frantically. What if he mounted small mirrors at strategic angles? Mirrors that would give him peripheral vision. Vision beyond the gun sight's limited field of view? What if he angled them to show the tracer paths from his own guns? This would let him walk his fire onto a target by watching the reflection, rather than squinting through inadequate iron sights. And then, the crucial leap. What if he combined those mirrors with a simple reflector sight, a piece of glass etched with an aiming reticle, positioned to let him track a target, while simultaneously watching his tracer patterns in the peripheral mirrors? It's not a true computing gun sight, like the sophisticated gyroscopic systems in Allied fighters. It's a jury-rigged, improvised combination of reflective surfaces and aiming references. But it might just work. Romano spends 3 hours that night, sketching designs, measuring angles, calculating sight lines with a carpenter's protractor he salvaged from the base machine shop. By dawn, he has detailed drawings of a mirror-assisted reflector sight system, a system that requires no powered components, no complex installation, and no factory modification. He also has a very serious problem. His design, his idea, is illegal. It violates Army Air Force Technical Order ZO 120 EG2, a regulation that explicitly prohibits unauthorized modifications to defensive armament. Installation without approval could, and should, result in a court-martial. Romano looks at his drawings. He thinks about his friend. He decides he doesn't care. A 22-year-old sergeant, armed with a high school education and a logbook full of forbidden sketches, cannot build a new weapon system alone. He needs a co-conspirator. He finds one in the most unlikely of places: the base sheet metal shop. Technical Sergeant Frank Kellerman was, in many ways, Romano's opposite. At 38, he was a career non-commissioned officer, a hardened veteran of the Great Depression. He was a man who understood machinery, not from textbooks, but from a lifetime of fixing the unfixable. He'd served in the Civilian Conservation Corps, building bridges and repairing equipment with nothing but scrap iron and raw ingenuity. Kellerman was a master scrounger, a pragmatist, and he held a quiet contempt for officers who valued regulations over results. On October 7, 1943, Romano approaches Kellerman's bench. He carries his logbook. He's terrified. He's not afraid of Kellerman, but of the words he's about to say. He lays the drawings on the workbench. Kellerman, wiping grease from his hands, studies the sketches for less than 5 minutes. He traces the lines for the mirror brackets, the mount for the reflector sight. He doesn't say a word. Finally, he looks up, his face flat and unreadable. "This is illegal, Sergeant." Romano's heart sinks. He nods. "Yes, Sergeant. You're asking me to perform an unauthorized modification to primary defensive armament. You're asking me to violate About 6 different technical orders. You know that, right? Yes, Sergeant. Kellerman looks past Romano, out the hangar door toward the flight line, where the ground crews are already patching the holes on the bombers that returned from Frankfurt. He looks back at the drawings. When do you fly again? Tomorrow, Sergeant. The target is Münster. Kellerman nods once. Then we'd better work fast. What follows is an act of industrial sabotage conducted by 2 loyal American soldiers. They begin after midnight in a dark, cold corner of the main maintenance hangar, long after the senior officers have gone to bed. They work using materials Kellerman has unofficially requisitioned over the past several weeks. This is a black market of survival. The base components come from salvaged aircraft parts. The curved convex mirrors are scavenged from the damaged navigation equipment of a B-17 that crash-landed the week before. The plexiglass sheets are cut from shattered canopy sections. The aluminum brackets are fabricated from a written-off airframe. But the crucial component, Trent, the heart of the entire system, is the reflector sight. Kellerman knows exactly where to get one. He leads Romano to the boneyard, a muddy field behind the hangars where wrecked aircraft are cannibalized for parts. He climbs onto the wing of a P-47 Thunderbolt fighter that had belly-landed and was destined for the scrap heap. From the cockpit, Kellerman carefully removes the undamaged N-3A reflector gun sight. This is the device that gives fighter pilots their deadly accuracy. It's designed for a roomy cockpit, for nose-mounted installation. It was never intended to be crammed into the tail of a B-17. Back in the hangar, Kellerman re-engineers the mounting brackets on the fly. He and Romano work through the night, fitting components, testing sight lines, making minute adjustments with hand tools. At 4:30 hours, just 2 hours before pre-flight briefing, Kellerman installs the complete assembly in Romano's aircraft, knockout dropper. The installation is crude. It's rough. The brackets are attached with standard aircraft bolts, not high-tensile strength aviation hardware. The mirrors are affixed using safety wire. The reflector sight itself is mounted to the gun yoke via a welded bracket that would horrify a Boeing engineer. Nothing about the modification appears in the aircraft's maintenance logbook. At the dawn briefing, Romano tells no one. His pilot, Lieutenant James Holbrook, trusts his crew and doesn't inspect the tail section before takeoff. The group commander doesn't know. The squadron armament officer definitely doesn't know. They launch for Münster at 07:30 hours. Over Germany, at 10:15 hours, the Luftwaffe rises to meet them. A Messerschmitt Bf-109 begins its attack run. The classic profile. 6 o'clock low, closing fast. Romano swivels his heavy guns. He flips a small hidden switch Kellerman installed, and the world changes. He squints, but this time not through a tiny metal ring. He looks through a clear piece of glass, and on that glass, an illuminated orange reticle floats in his field of vision, perfectly overlaying the distant target. In his peripheral vision, the 3 small mirrors Kellerman installed are reflecting the morning sun. They show him his own gun barrels. They give him instantaneous feedback about where his weapons are pointing before he even fires. He presses the trigger. A 3-second burst. The tracer pattern, visible in the mirrors, shows him he's shooting just behind the target. It's the same mistake he always made. But now, he can see it. He doesn't guess. He adjusts. He leads the fighter by the reticle's diameter. He walks the stream of tracers, using the mirrors, until the orange aiming dot and the stream of 50 caliber bullets converge on the 109's engine. He fires again. The Bf-109's engine cowling explodes. It simply disintegrates. The fighter rolls inverted, completely out of control, and spins toward the earth, trailing a thick, greasy column of black smoke. Romano stares at his guns, then at the mirrors, then back at the empty patch of sky where the fighter flew just seconds before. Holy he whispers into his oxygen. Mask! It works! Romano lands at Bassingbourn at 1340 hours with 1 confirmed kill. His first. The celebration lasts exactly 20 minutes. At 1400 hours, during a routine post-flight inspection, Crew Chief Master Sergeant Donald Pierce is checking the tail section for battle damage when he sees it. The welded bracket, the strange mirrors, the unauthorized wires running from the gun sight. Pierce, a by-the-books man, immediately reports the discrepancy to the squadron armament officer. Captain Richard Voss arrives at the hard stand 10 minutes later. He carries a clipboard and an expression of barely contained fury. Voss is an engineer, a man who believes in protocols, testing, and regulations. He sees the world in black and white, and what he sees in Romano's tail position is a flagrant, dangerous violation. Sergeant Romano, Voss says, his voice tight with military precision. Would you care to explain the unauthorized equipment installed in your gun position? Romano snaps to attention. Sir, I installed an improved sighting system. You installed? What? Voss's voice rises, drawing the attention of other ground crews. Do you have any comprehension of the regulations you just violated? Technical Order 0120 EG2 explicitly prohibits unauthorized modifications to defensive armament. He jabs a finger toward the tail section. This isn't a hot rod in your backyard, Sergeant. This is a combat aircraft. Unapproved modifications can compromise structural integrity. They can create fire hazards. They can interfere with other systems. Sir, Romano says, his voice shaking, the system works. I shot down a 109. I don't care if you shot down the entire Luftwaffe, Voss shouts. That equipment is not Army Air Force standard. It is not Boeing approved. It has not undergone testing protocols. You will remove it immediately. Romano's pilot, Lieutenant Holbrook, steps forward. Captain, with respect, my tail gunner got his first kill today using that sight. Maybe we should— Your opinion is noted, Lieutenant. Voss cuts him off, not even looking at him. The modification will be removed. That is final. He glares at Romano. Consider yourself lucky I'm not having you brought up on charges for destruction of government property. Now, get that junk off my aircraft. But the confrontation has drawn a crowd, and word is already spreading. Word spreads through the 91st Bomb Group like wildfire. By evening mess, every gunner on the base, and half the pilots, knows about Romano's illegal mirror sight, and they know he got his first kill with it. The base divides. Opinions split sharply down the lines of rank. The veteran gunners, the men who have to fly the missions, gather around Romano's table, firing questions. How difficult is the installation? What's the field of view? Can the mirrors withstand the vibration at 20,000 feet? They see a lifeline, but the engineering officers and senior maintenance staff, they react with alarm. This isn't innovation. It's a breakdown of discipline. Captain Theodore Morrison, the group's assistant armament officer and Captain Voss's superior, convenes an emergency meeting on the night of October 11th. 14 officers attend. The tone is hostile. Gentlemen, Morrison begins, we have a serious discipline problem. A sergeant, an enlisted man, has performed unauthorized modifications on a primary weapon system using salvaged components of unknown provenance. This sets a dangerous precedent. What happens next? Do we let navigators rewire their radios? Do we let pilots adjust their own engine fuel mixtures? If every enlisted man decides to re-engineer his weapon system based on personal preference, we'll have chaos. The room erupts. With respect, sir, that's absurd. Major William Calhoun, the 91st's operations officer, stands up. Calhoun is a combat man, a pilot who has seen his own crews shot down. Romano shot down an enemy fighter using this system. Our tail gunners currently achieve, what, an 8% hit rate? If this modification improves that, even marginally, Morrison's face reddens. Major, we have no data. We have no testing. One lucky shot, one successful engagement, Doesn't validate an unapproved, jury-rigged, then test it. Calhoun fires back. Don't remove it, test it. Put Romano up on the next mission. Tomorrow, have him fly with the modification installed. Gun cameras will capture objective data. If it doesn't work, I'll remove it myself. But if it does work, maybe we should be installing these systems instead of court-martialing the man who invented them. The argument intensifies. Engineers cite safety concerns and slippery slopes. Combat officers cite casualty rates and the grim, unsustainable mathematics of Black Thursday. The meeting devolves into shouting. At 2,000 hours, the dispute, now too loud and too bitter to be solved at the squadron level, reaches the top. It reaches the desk of Colonel Stanley Ray, the commanding officer of the entire 91st Bomb Group. Colonel Ray is 53 years old. He served as a bomber pilot in the First World War. He is a career officer, a man who understands and respects the chain of command. But he is also a pragmatist, a man who has been signing letters to the mothers and wives of his dead airmen for months. He summons Morrison, Calhoun, and Sergeant Romano to his office. He listens to the arguments from both sides for 90 minutes. Without interrupting once, he listens to Captain Morrison detail the regulations, the dangers, the breach of discipline. He listens to Major Calhoun detail the casualty rates, the failed tactics, the desperate need for any solution. Finally, he speaks. His voice is quiet, but it cuts through the tension like a knife. How many bombers did we lose last week? Silence fills the room. Captain Morrison, Ray says, his voice flat. I asked you a question. 17, sir. From this group alone. 17, Ray repeats. 17 B-17s. That's 170 men. And how many fighters did our tail gunners shoot down during those same missions? Confirmed kills, Morrison shifts. 3, sir. Ray nods slowly, letting the numbers hang in the air. 17 of our bombers, against 3 of their fighters. He looks directly at Morrison, his eyes cold. Captain, your concern about unauthorized modifications is noted. Your concern about regulations is valid. But I am far more concerned about losing 17 goddamn airplanes every week. Because our defensive armament doesn't work. He turns to Romano, who is standing at rigid attention. Sergeant, your modification stays on your aircraft. Captain Morrison's face is pale. Sir, I must protest. The regulations are noted, Captain. Colonel Ray cuts him off. He turns back to Romano. You will fly the next 3 combat missions with your modification installed. You will also fly with gun cameras recording every single engagement. If your hit rate improves measurably, as Major Calhoun suggests, we will authorize this mirror sight for installation across the group. If it doesn't, or if it fails, we'll remove the equipment, and you will face disciplinary action for the unauthorized modification. Is that understood? Romano's knees are shaking, but he finds his voice. Yes, sir. Good. Ray stands, signaling the meeting is over. Gentlemen, this is adjourned. He pauses, looking at his engineering officer. And Captain Morrison, get me a set of those damned mirror drawings. If this thing works, I want to know how. The test begins the very next day, October 12, 1943. The target is Bremen. Romano flies his 4th combat mission with the modified sight system. The gun cameras are whirring, recording every moment. The 8th Air Force dispatches 236 bombers. The Luftwaffe scrambles 250 interceptors. At 11:23 hours over the German coast, the attacks begin. A Focke-Wulf 190 dives from 7 o'clock high. Romano tracks it through the reflector sight. The illuminated reticle provides an instantaneous aim point. His peripheral vision, thanks to the mirrors, captures his own gun alignment. He fires a 4-second burst, adjusting in real time as the tracer reflections show him his bullet path. The FW-190's wing root erupts in flames. The fighter breaks off, trailing smoke. At 11:47 hours, a Bf-109 approaches from 6 o'clock level. The classic deadly tail attack. Romano centers the reticle, checks his mirror feedback, and fires. The 109's canopy shatters. The fighter rolls inverted and dives straight down. The gun camera footage captures both engagements in crystal clear. Undeniable detail, Romano returns to Bassingbourn with 2 confirmed kills and 1 probable. His total ammunition expenditure for the mission: 380 rounds. The engineering staff reviews the footage that night, in stunned silence. Captain Morrison watches Romano's tracer patterns, visible in the mirror's reflection, walk directly onto the targets. Even he cannot dispute the evidence. The mirror-reflector combination allows for real-time fire correction that was simply impossible with the old ring and bead sights. The numbers are analyzed. The average tail gunner in the 91st Bomb Group fired 2,800 rounds for every 1 confirmed kill. On his first test, Michael Romano fired 190 rounds per kill. It's not just an improvement. It's a revolution. All right, Morrison admits quietly to Colonel Ray. It works, but, sir, we need proper engineering drawings, standardized components, installation procedures. We can't just weld scrap metal to the bombers. How long to get it approved? Colonel Ray asks. Morrison sighs. 6 weeks, minimum. We'd have to coordinate with 8th Air Force headquarters, submit modification proposals, get approval from the states. We don't have 6 weeks, Ray snaps. We're losing the war now. He turns to Technical Sergeant Frank Kellerman, the man who had helped build the prototype. Sergeant, how many of these systems can you build per day using the materials you have on this base? Kellerman, the master scrounger, considers. With help from the sheet metal shop, if we scavenge reflector sights from the boneyard, maybe 4 complete assemblies per day, sir. Then start building, Ray commands. I want every tail gunner in this group equipped within 2 weeks. Morrison, objects. Sir, without proper authorization from 8th Air Force. Captain, Ray says, his voice final, I will handle 8th Air Force. You handle the engineering specifications. Get it done. Dismissed. What follows is an improvised manufacturing operation that would horrify military procurement bureaucrats. It is a monument to enlisted man ingenuity. Kellerman and his maintenance team become a covert production line. They scavenge components from across Bassingbourn, reflector sights from written-off P-47s and P-38s, mirrors from damaged navigation equipment, aluminum stock from supply warehouses. They establish an assembly line in the corner of the maintenance hangar, fabricating, by hand, 4 complete mirror sight systems per day. As each bomber lands from a mission, its tail guns are stripped of the ring and bead sight, and the Romano-Kellerman modification is bolted into place. By October 20th, 18 B-17s in the 91st Bomb Group carry the illegal modification. The results are immediate and dramatic. October 20th, on a mission to Duren, tail gunners equipped with the new mirror sights achieve 11 confirmed kills against 47 fighter attacks. That's a 23.4% hit rate, nearly triple the previous average. November 3rd, Wilhelmshaven, 16 confirmed kills. Hit rate, 23.5%. November 5th, Gelsenkirchen, 13 confirmed kills. Hit rate, 21.8%. The mathematical impact transforms bomber survivability. Luftwaffe pilots, accustomed to attacking B-17s from the rear with relative impunity, are suddenly dying. They are facing accurate, sustained, and deadly defensive fire. The proof comes not just from Allied gun cameras, but from the enemy. German after-action reports begin to note, with alarm, the increased effectiveness of American tail weapons. They recommend revising approach tactics. Major Hans-Joachim Jabs, a Luftwaffe fighter ace, writes in his combat diary, The flying fortresses have become significantly more dangerous. Their tail gunners now demonstrate accuracy previously seen only in power turrets. Attacks from the rear quadrant now carry unacceptable risk, the word, and the data. Finally reach 8th Air Force Headquarters at High Wycombe. On November 18th, a staff car pulls up unannounced at Bassingbourn. Out steps Brigadier General Frederick Castle, commander of the 4th Bombardment Wing. He's not there to court-martial anyone. He's there to see the miracle for himself. He inspects Romano's tail position personally. He examines the crude brackets, the salvaged mirrors. He reviews the gun camera footage. He interviews Sergeant Romano for 30 minutes. "Sergeant," General Castle asks, "how did you know this would work?" Romano, still a 22-year-old sergeant, just shrugs. "I didn't, sir. But the old sights definitely didn't work. So I figured anything else might be an improvement." Castle laughs. The first time anyone at headquarters has laughed about tail gunnery in months. "Fair point," he says. He studies the mirror assembly. This can be manufactured at the depot level. "Yes, sir," Romano says. "Sergeant Kellerman has the drawings." General Castle nods. "I'm authorizing immediate implementation across the entire 4th Wing. Every B-17 will receive this modification within 30 days. He looks directly at Romano. "Sergeant, you probably saved more American lives today than you will ever know." By December 1943, Romano's mirror reflector sight system, now officially designated the Field Expedient Tail Gun Aiming System Type 1, is installed in over 200 B-17s. Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center, which was already developing an improved tail turret, gets wind of Romano's field fix. They incorporate his core principles, the reflector sight, the improved visibility, into their design. The production, Cheyenne Tail Turret, which begins appearing on brand-new B-17Gs in January 1944, features an N8 reflector sight, positioned almost exactly where Romano's salvaged P-47 sight sat in his improvised installation. The illegal modification had become standard equipment. The impact on bomber crew survival rates is measurable and significant. For B-17 groups equipped with the improved tail sights, losses from tail attacks decrease by approximately 35% between late 1943 and March 1944. That percentage translates to dozens of bombers and hundreds of lives. Saved by a modification one engineering captain initially called illegal and dangerous. Michael Romano continues flying combat missions through February 1944. His personal tally reaches 7 confirmed kills and 4 probables. Exceptional for a tail gunner. But on February 22nd, during the Big Week offensive, his bomber takes heavy flak damage over Leipzig. He continues engaging fighters, even as hydraulic fluid and fuel spray through his tail section. His aircraft, Knockout Dropper, crash lands in Belgium. The crew survives, but Romano spends the final months of the war in a German POW camp. He returns to the United States in May 1945, weighing just 127 pounds. The Army Air Forces awards him the Distinguished Flying Cross for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Height. The citation notes his innovative contribution to defensive armament effectiveness. It carefully avoids mentioning that his innovation was, at first, illegal. Romano never seeks publicity. He declines interview requests from military journals. When Boeing engineers invite him to their Seattle facility to discuss the Cheyenne turret's development, he politely refuses. He says, "I just made what I needed to survive. Other people turned it into something official." He returns to Pittsburgh, marries his high school sweetheart, and works as a machinist for 37 years. He rarely, if ever, discusses the war. But the legacy of his improvised mirror reflector system extends far beyond his personal modesty. Post-war analysis by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey quantified the staggering impact. B-17 groups equipped with improved tailgun sights born from Romano's design, suffered 32 to 37% fewer tail attack losses. Across thousands of bomber missions, that percentage represents approximately 840 aircraft and 8,400 crewmen, who survived combat they statistically should not have. 8,400 lives. In 1983, the 91st Bomb Group Association holds a reunion at the old Bassingbourn airfield. Several gray-haired tail gunners who flew with Romano's mirror reflector sights attend. One of them, a man named Gerald Hammond, brings a salvaged mirror bracket he has kept for 40 years. He stands before Romano, now 60 years old, and says simply, "Because of you and those mirrors, I came home. My kids exist because you couldn't accept lousy gun sights. Thank you." Romano, uncomfortable with the emotion, just shrugs and replies, "You would have done the same thing. We all just wanted to survive long enough to go home." But that's where Romano was wrong. Thousands of tail gunners face the same inadequate sights. Thousands face the same impossible firing solutions and the same terrible casualty rates. Only one of them refused to accept the status quo. Only one of them had the audacity to break regulations, the skill to improvise a solution, and the courage to risk a court-martial for the chance to save lives. Michael Romano died in 2003 at the age of 79. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentions his military service in a single line: World War II veteran, 8th Air Force. It doesn't mention that he saved thousands of lives with mirrors and salvaged aircraft parts. It doesn't mention that his illegal modification became standard equipment for an entire Air Force. It doesn't mention that while generals and engineers debated regulations and testing protocols, a 22-year-old factory worker from Pittsburgh solved a problem they couldn't. Because the best innovations don't come from a committee. They don't come from asking for permission. They come from people who refuse to watch others die while waiting for approval.